Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be talking about cybersecurity risks in industrial Internet of Things and operational technology systems with a comparison to consumer IoT. While most of us are familiar with IoT through smart homes and personal devices, this presentation focuses on what happens when the same connectivity enters industrial environments. So I'll start with the big picture. The big picture, why IoT security is different. So, this slide sets the foundation. Today, IoT connects everything from home appliances to highly complex industrial systems. What changes as we move from consumer IoT to industrial IoT is not connectivity but consequence. Now, consumer IoT is designed mainly for convenience and personalization. Industrial IoT and OT systems, on the other hand, are designed for automation, monitoring, and control of critical processes. So, while a consumer IoT breach may lead to privacy loss or device misuse, an IIoT or OT breach can result in production shutdowns, equipment damage, or even safety risks. So, same connectivity, but completely different impact. Next, I'll start with CIoT versus IIoT versus OT. To clarify terminology, this slide distinguishes between three domains. Consumer IoT includes everyday connected devices like smart TVs, wearables, and home automation systems. Industrial IoT focuses on connected sensors and systems used in enterprises, such as factory sensors, predictive maintenance tools, and connected production lines. Operational technology or OT refers to hardware and software that directly controls physical processes, which is used in industries like power manufacturing, oil, and gas. A critical point here is that IoT often bridges IT and OT, improving efficiency but also widening the attack surface. Next, next I'll take up the core and comparison snapshot. Now, this table summarizes the core differences. Consumer IoT prioritizes user convenience, while IIoT and OT prioritize operational safety and continuity. Threats in CIoT are typically data theft or botnets, whereas IIoT faces ransomware and sabotage. The impact also differs sharply: privacy loss versus production halts and physical damage. Finally, while CIoT struggles with weak authentication, industrial environments struggle with legacy systems that cannot be easily patched, requiring very different security strategies. Now, I'll take up the threat landscape map. Now, this slide, it highlights an important insight. The types of cyber attacks are often the same across consumer and industrial environments: botnets, ransomware, advanced persistent threats, and supply chain attacks. What changes is the outcome. In consumer IoT, attacks typically lead to privacy breaches or internet scale DDoS attacks. In industrial environments, the same attack families can cause production shutdowns, equipment damage, safety hazards, and disruption of critical services. So, the takeaway here is that severity escalates sharply when cyber threats enter industrial systems. Coming up next would be the comparative vulnerability framework. Now, this slide compares vulnerabilities layer by layer. At the device level, consumer IoT often suffers from weak passwords and insecure firmware, while industrial environments rely on legacy devices with limited patchability. At the network layer, CIoT faces poor Wi Fi security, whereas OT networks are often flat and use insecure industrial protocols. At the application level, consumer systems struggle with weak APIs, while industrial systems are exposed to vendor dependencies. Finally, data risks shift from privacy leakage in CIoT to integrity and safety risks in IIoT, where manipulated sensor data can directly affect physical operations. Next up, IIoT or OT attack surface deep dive. Now, coming to the slide, it explains where industrial risk really explodes. First, many OT environments rely on older systems that were never designed for modern connectivity and are difficult to update without downtime. Second, IIoT connects sensors and control systems to enterprise IT networks, dramatically increasing entry points for attackers. Finally, when IT and OT converge, cyber threats no longer remain digital, they become cyber physical. They are capable of causing real world operational disruption. Now, this is where cybersecurity moves beyond IT and into safety and resilience. Coming up to the architecture security evaluation. This slide looks at a security across the IIoT architecture from device to edge, fog, and cloud. Each layer plays a different role and therefore requires a different security focus. Devices need strong identity and secure firmware. Edge systems require access control and real time anomaly detection. Fog layers focus on segmentation and policy enforcement. Cloud platforms emphasize encryption, identity management, and scalable monitoring. The evaluation lens across all layers remains consistent. That is authentication, data integrity, and anomaly detection. The next, from the weakness point, my teammate Deenabandhan will take over.
Thank you. So from here, we would want to highlight where the IIoT architecture is most vulnerable. These weaknesses are not theoretical, but real breakdowns of repeatedly exploited in the past attacks. The first point of weakness is the identity authentication gap. Many industrial devices still rely on shared passwords or default credentials. Key management is usually an afterthought. Once attacker comprises of a single credential, they can pivot deeper into the network. Second is the remote access exposure. Industrial vendors often use remote maintenance connections. These are convenient but poorly secured VPNs, and unmanaged remote tools become hidden in entry points. The third vulnerability comes from the flat network. A lack of segmentation means compromise in one machine can spread across PLCs and SCADA systems without resistance. Fourth, the monitoring blind spots. Traditional IT monitoring tools do not understand OT traffic patterns, making anomalies difficult to detect early on. Finally, the legacy protocols and devices. Industrial components were never built for internet connectivity, so they lack encryption and patching capabilities. Moving ahead, to understand why these weaknesses matter, we map them into into the real world cyber incidents. Across the industry, we repeatedly see these patterns. One, exploits scale using weak endpoints, and attacks manipulate industrial logic. Ransomware forces operational shutdowns. These patterns demonstrate that attack surface in IIoT isn't just about data, it becomes a cyber physical risk. The consequences escalate from privacy loss to disruption of critical services. The following cases are one good examples of this. The first one is Mirai case, which is an example of threat at the consumer IoT level. The malware searched for devices exposed online and logged in using default passwords. It then infected millions of devices and then used them collectively to launch one of the largest DDoS attacks ever seen. The key reason here is that weak credentials do not just risk individual devices, they can weaponize millions of endpoints into coordinated attacks. The next case is the Stuxnet case. This involves this brings us into the industrial purview. It demonstrated how attackers can penetrate isolated OT environments through indirect pathways and, more importantly, manipulate PLC logic into after the functioning of physical equipment. The malware slowed centrifuges while feeding normal readings to monitoring systems, delayed detection. The lesson here is critical. Segmentation and purpose built anomaly detection for industrial traffic is essential. Traditional IT defense alone are not sufficient because the stakes in OT are physical. The next one is the colonial pipeline case. Uh, this shows how ransomware can paralyze critical infrastructure even if the initial breach occurs on the IT side. Executive decided to shut operations preemptively because visibility into OT systems were limited. This incident highlights that IoT hasn't just about security and cybersecurity anymore. It's a business continuity and public resilience issue. Segmentation between IT and OT, well-tested incidents and response plans, manual fallback modes becomes essential and safeguards. Moving ahead, the cyber risk quantification. To justify security investments, we must move beyond intuition. We used a simple risk model. Expected annual loss equals probability into downtime into cost per hour into safety multiplier. This multiplier is important because OT brings regulatory penalties for safety concerns. Quantifying expected loss helps organizations to make proportional investments and segmentations thus reducing redundancy and increasing the security. Moving ahead, building the resilience. Based on the weakness and case learnings, we propose a resilience focused strategy rather than isolated defenses. Implement zero trust principle and enforce segmentation between IT and OT. Use continuous monitoring and anomaly detection turned for industrial protocols. Strengthen secure by design hardware and patching governance. Align to standards like IEC 62443 and NIST. And finally, the key takeaways from here is segmentation, first to contain and compromise, build visibility across devices, edge, fog, and cloud layers, strengthen governance around vendors, patching audits. Threat types may overlap across IoT ecosystems, but industrial environments raise the stakes dramatically. So the goal is not zero incidents, the goal is resilience. Detect early, respond safely, and recover fast. Thank you.